Meet Brandon Jones, a Christian, a father, an entrepreneur, and a Republican candidate for the California governor for the upcoming 2026 election.
I think the fact that I'm not a career politician certainly sets me apart. I've positioned myself, and it's true, but from day one, that I'm an everyday Californian fighting for everyday Californians. I don't think that we need even close to the amount of money that Newsom and others in Sacramento say we need to run the state. We all understand that the public school system is a mess. I have two boys that are in the public school system, so as a parent, see it and deal with it firsthand. What we really need is a healthy sense of competition for the public school system. And by giving parents more of a choice as to where their property tax dollars are going to be allocated, that really does create a sense of healthy competition. So by the end of year 3, my goal would be to remove state income tax for anyone who's earning $250,000 a year or less. Most people in California do not approve of the work that Gavin Newsom has done over what will be his last 8 years as governor. But look, if each individual Californian does not exercise their right to vote, then we'll probably have a pretty good chance of getting somebody along the same lines as Newsom. We certainly don't want that.
Hey, what's going on, family and friends? We're back with another exclusive production, and today's episode is a special one. I'm joined by a man stepping boldly into politics with a mission to transform California. He's a Christian, a husband, a father, an entrepreneur, and now a Republican candidate running to be the next governor of California in the upcoming 2026 election. Meet Brandon Jones. Brandon is on a mission to restore affordability, safety, and opportunity for everyday Californians. From proposing the elimination of state income tax to pushing for real educational reform, tackling California's wildfire crisis, and rethinking homelessness solutions, Brandon brings faith, integrity, and bold ideas to the table. In this interview, we dive into his vision for California, his journey from entrepreneur to candidate, and why he believes now is the time for change. So grab your coffee, buckle up, and let's roll the tape to my one-on-one interview with Brandon Jones, the future governor of California. Thanks for tuning in. Love you mucho. Hey, what's going on, family and friends? We're back with another exclusive production. Today, I'm joined by an individual making a swift move into politics for the Republican Party, aiming to become the next governor of California come 2026. So let's bring him up onto the stage. Oh, boom. There he is. Meet Brandon Jones, a Christian, a father, an entrepreneur, and a Republican candidate for the California governor for the upcoming 2026 election. With a bold plan to restore affordability, safety, and opportunity, Brandon is committed to leading with faith, integrity, and real solutions for everyday Californians. Thanks for joining me today, Brandon. How you doing today, sir?
Hey, Ray, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. I'm super excited. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm thrilled to have you on my channel. So thank you for joining. I can't wait to dive into all things politics, all things Republican Party, but more importantly, all things about you, sir. Before we dive into your mission and your campaign, let's start off with who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you touched just on a few things, and I'll elaborate a little bit. So yeah, again, my name is Brandon Jones. I'm a Republican candidate to be California's next governor in the upcoming 2026 gubernatorial election. I'm a Christian, I'm a husband, I'm a father of 2 teenage boys, and my family and I live down here in the San Diego area. Professionally, I've been an entrepreneur for the last 20 years, and this would mark my first go at politics, as you already alluded to, Ray.
For those that are tuning in today, thank you for joining us. I do have Brandon's homepage available on the screen right now. So let's dive in, Brandon. Thanks for briefing the audience on just who you are. Let's talk about your bold vision for California's future. What's inspired you to take on this initiative to campaign and become the next governor for California?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, Ray, being an entrepreneur for the last 20 years, back in 2023, I exited a digital ad agency that I had owned for a number of years, and I was just considering my next move. It was on my heart, not only my heart, but the heart of my wife's as well, to do something to serve the people of California. And initially, politics wasn't really in the plan. But as I began to contemplate just my desire to want to serve the people of the state, and also considering my professional background and the fact that Gavin Newsom was no longer going to be governor, so there wasn't an incumbent in the race. Those things combined, just of course, after much prayer and consideration, led to the decision to declare my candidacy last December.
That is wonderful to hear. So this is fresh for you, and I don't want to be pessimistic at all. I'm always an optimistic, but I have to be straight up. You're potentially considered as the underdog. So what's going to make you stand out in comparison to the competition?
Yeah, I think the fact that I'm not a career politician certainly sets me apart. I've positioned myself, and it's true, but from day one, that I'm an everyday Californian fighting for everyday Californians. So that's been my starting point. I feel the pain that everybody else feels, right? I know what it's like to struggle to buy a home. I know what it's like to struggle to have your kids in the public education system. I know what it's like to deal with the rising costs in California. So I'm coming at this from the perspective of somebody who feels the pain of living here just like everybody else. And so I think that would be one thing that really sets me apart from other people that are running that may have had a career in politics and are maybe disconnected in some way from their constituents.
I did a deep dive on you, Brandon, ahead of this, and you've got some really great initiatives that you're working on, such as Restore California. The website can be found at restoreca.org. I want to dive into that. I want to talk about, you've proposed eliminating the state income tax, like you mentioned, potentially putting $700 back into each and every Californian's pocket each month. Do you mind?
On average, yeah.
How would you address critics concerned about the impact on state revenue and public services?
Yeah, and it's a legitimate concern and it's a fair question. I think the place to start from is asking, is it even possible for a state to operate without requiring its residents to pay state income tax? And the answer is certainly yes. There's 9 other states in the US that do it. Obviously, the ones that tend to make news the most would be Florida and Texas. So generally speaking, it is possible for a state to not only survive, but thrive without state income tax. The question is, how do you pull it off? Now, if you look at the state of California, just to throw some quick numbers out there, the current budget is nearly $330 billion. About 60% of the budget is slated to be funded from state income tax. So we're talking about no small amount. So when we talk about California operating without state income tax, obviously it's not as simple as just removing state income tax, right? You either have to reduce the overall tax burden and or replace state income tax with something else. So the first thing that I would propose, and this would be really a day one initiative of mine, would be to audit the state legislature. I don't think that we need even close to the amount of money that Newsom and others in Sacramento say we need to run the state. In fact, some of the research I've done indicates that about 15% of the budget is bloat. And I don't think that's too hard to imagine. So if we were to audit the state government and being able to shave off 15% of what is allegedly needed to run the state, right there, we're talking about close to $50 billion. So right now, if $160 billion is coming from state income tax to help fund the operation of the state, if we just got rid of bloat and removed that from the state income requirement, you're talking about removing over 1/3 of what's currently coming from state income tax. So that alone will make a huge difference. But there's other things too. And I have a 10-year plan to completely obliterate state income tax in California. Can't cover it all in the short time that we have here. But a large part of that has to do with replacing the state income tax requirement by doing things like increasing the sales tax base. So taxing things like luxury services, digital products, other things too, like tourism tax. Florida does a great job of implementing different ways to get more tax from tourists. Things like when people book a hotel, say in California, you would charge maybe like a $2 or $3 surcharge on their booking. Those things alone could add up to billions of dollars a year, to where without even increasing the sales tax rate, by expanding the base and removing the bloat, you're very close to getting there already.
Keep fighting the good fight, Brandon, and drain the swamp. You're almost applying the same principles of what we're seeing with Doge, but on the state level. Kudos to you. Is there principles that you would apply from Doge, and even taking a step further, knowing your background, having served in the military? Thank you for your service, sir. What type of fundamentals would you apply to your campaign? I know you mentioned from improving the tax structure, applying a faith-based principles. What other types of strategic approaches would you apply to your campaign?
Yeah, really. One question that I've always started with, as I've over the past 8-9 months put these different policy positions together, is I've just really started with a very basic question that I think will answer your question. Is what is best for the residents of California? It seems just like a no-brainer, very rudimentary question, but that's really the starting point. What is best for the people of California? Which really ties into my mission statement, which is to make California a place that works for everybody. And so that's really the starting point. And so that is the starting point, would really help frame all these different policy positions that I've come up with over the past 8-9 months.
Appreciate that. Switching gears to an educational reform, you've been vocal about your school of choice and and a performance-based teacher compensation program. How would your educational plan transform California's public school system? And how do you respond to resistance from teachers' unions, especially when we start to see propaganda in some respect being infiltrated to the students by the faculty themselves?
We all understand that the public school system is a mess. I have two boys that are in the public school system. So as a parent, see it and deal with it firsthand. The issue primarily is the fact that the public school system doesn't really have any direct competition. So there's really financially no incentive for them to change their ways, right? Because all of the tax money goes to the public school system. And even though we have things like private schools and charter schools, and even obviously parents can do homeschooling if they like, it's a small fraction of the student body that takes advantage of those alternate forms of education. What we really need is a healthy sense of competition for the public school system. And by giving parents more of a choice as to where their property tax dollars are going to be allocated, that really does create a sense of healthy competition. And so that alone would give the public school system a true incentive as they see money being pulled from them into these other areas to really reconsider curriculum and their overall philosophy of education. So I think that alone would largely, I think, address any pushback that would come from the teachers unions, because look, now we have healthy competition.
I love to hear your focus on education, and I believe the educational system is ripe for innovation and bringing it into a modern framework. Being mindful of the next generation, how do you aim to reach these younger minds that are really, I would say, digital natives in this modern world that's underpinned by technology?
Yeah.
How are you going to reach this cohort of Americans? What's your strategy?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And the next generation, those folks that are in their 20s, coming out of college, looking to start families in that particular season of life, they are harder to reach, not just by virtue of the fact that they're young, but that is the age demographic that is largely uninvolved politically. So for that reason, it is more difficult to have meaningful political conversations with them compared to folks who are a bit older. But I think the tide is changing, especially as this next generation is experiencing firsthand how difficult it is to have a life in California. To answer your question, my campaign has already initiated dialogue with, as one example, see San Diego. So in fact, a couple of weeks ago, I had a meeting with them, and we're going to have a much larger meeting on campus to really just have an open dialogue with the student body there in terms of what they would like to see happen politically in the state of California. So it really just starts with having that open dialogue. And that's one way to go to the campuses, have those conversations. My campaign has also hosted town hall events, primarily throughout San Diego. And we've had a number of young people that have come to attend those. And those are an open forum. I give a presentation, but there's a lot of just conversation and dialogue. So that's one way that's been good. Doing podcasts just like this. I think that podcasts and different other digital forms of media are becoming the source of truth for more and more people, as opposed to traditional media and news outlets. So those would be a few ways that my campaign is engaging with the next generation.
Way to be transparent and mindful of these new digital trends. We've saw it in the presidential campaign or following it, how independent journalists were actually elevated to the top, also linked to being potential candidates for politics. And so it's really interesting to see the evolution of politics in these digital worlds intersecting. And it's, again, it's very ripe for innovation. And kudos to you, because being transparent and creating that dialogue with the next generation of patriots, you got to be transparent. You got to build trust. And so kudos to you for being mindful of that. What else you're mindful of is your sense of the environment and forestry. You've connected California's wildfire crisis to poor forestry management and regulatory overreach. What specific policies would you implement to address this issue while balancing environmental concerns?
Yeah, and I'll start just by just a quick story. Some months back in the wake of the LA wildfires, my wife and I went up, and in fact, my wife grew up in LA, so there's a lot of family there. It's a part of California that's very close to our hearts, and we visited Altadena and drove through there, and it was like nothing I'd ever seen before, Ray. It looked like a nuclear bomb went off. And we came across one guy in a hazmat suit who was cleaning debris off a property, and the house was just down to rubble. And it was his mother's home. And I just went up and asked him what's been the most difficult part of trying to literally rebuild, just the length of time it takes to get anything done. And I think that on top of just the reality of having to deal with these different wildfires, makes rebuilding someone's life here just close to impossible. To answer your question, one thing that really needs to be done is to streamline the process by which these permits get approved to allow for construction to take place, for debris removal. It takes too long to get anything done. And the longer it takes, the more costly it becomes for people that own land and property. And it just becomes unsustainable for them just to keep waiting to rebuild their lives. But I think we need to even take a step back and ask, why did we see, just to use the LA wildfires recently as an example, because it was so extensive, how did those fires get so out of hand? And there's a number of things we could say as it relates to the water crisis, but one thing I'll hone in on is the fact that California does not do healthy prevention like it used to. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the timber industry has been nearly decimated. Back in the 1980s, I think there was close to 150 sawmills in California, and now there's 30. So we just don't have the industry in place to implement the kind of removal of dead brush and dead trees that we used to. So we need to invest in those industries and incentivize them to want to come back to California. We also need to be more proactive in doing things like controlled burns, just really common sense stuff that we just don't see anymore. We need to return to that. And I think that'll really help mitigate the kind of damages that we see from fires going forward.
It's a shame. I had covered the LA fires on my channel. Not only did I drive up through Sunset Boulevard and see the just anarchy and the banks torched, the Costco and cars left in the middle of the street. It was wild. Having seen that, I did speak to some of those first responders to get their POV on what they thought was the potential trigger for this massive fire that just engulfed Los Angeles. And they all pointed towards leadership. And so it's just such a bummer from a top-down perspective, from the insurance commissioner to the LA Water Department fire representative to Karen Bass. It was just really a bummer. So I hope that you can step up and provide the appropriate leadership and be there for the people in those trying times. Hopefully that never happens, but God forbid it does. I hope that you're that type of man which I'm sure you are. I can already tell that you're a man that's going to stand by his people and be there for us. But anyways, I'd like to tap dance on your faith in politics before we conclude this interview here, because I know we're trying to keep this short here. I'd love to have you back on the channel. So especially as you ramp up your campaign here, but let's talk on your faith in politics. Your Christian faith clearly influences your worldview and policy positions. How do you balance faith-based convictions with representing a diverse and secular state like California? There's a broad audience of Californians from all over the world. So how are you going to balance your approach with faith and politics and serving the broad community?
One thing I'll say is that I don't view faith and politics as being mutually exclusive. Scripture talks about that government has been established by God, and therefore those who are in government are servants of God. And we even see that, right? We refer to politicians as public servants. And so government's established by God. Those who are in politics ultimately serve God and by extension serve the people. And so to answer your question, we need to identify what is the biblical then view of political leadership. And that is to uphold a biblical standard of righteousness. And there's a lot that could be said about that and to unpack that. But really what it boils down to is loving your neighbor, right? Doing unto others as you would want them to do unto you, right? Showing them sacrificial service, love, compassion, empathy. And this really goes back to what I said a few minutes ago, is the leading question for me is what is best for the people of California? Now, obviously, not everyone's going to agree on everything. But look, everybody wants integrity. Everybody wants honesty. Everybody wants accountability. Everybody wants a leader who's going to roll up his or her sleeves and do whatever they can to fight for the best interests of the people that live in this state. And so I don't think that particular viewpoint is overly divisive. We can argue about certain positions and how we're going to get things done, but everybody wants that.
Oh man, I would love to really share how I feel and what I think in this world of politics and entrepreneurship and how it, at least from my perspective, intersects with a faith-based view. And so I'm here to echo your statements and sentiment, Brandon. So I appreciate you sharing your position on faith and politics. So thank you very much, sir. Now, if you don't mind, with the few minutes that we have left, do you mind giving a forward-thinking statement? If you win, what's the first executive action you'll take on day one, and what will success look like for your first year in office?
Yeah, so a few things that I would roll out day one is I would audit the state legislature, and I already mentioned that in our opening. But we really need to audit to figure out where money's being spent. I think that is one of the most important areas of concern for the people of California is just feeling like they're bleeding financially, paying the state, but they don't know how their tax dollars are in turn making their life better. So really auditing the state government, identifying who's doing what, where the money's going, cut waste, reduce bloat, the things we've already talked about. So that'd be a day one initiative. The
Man,
other thing that I would want to do day one is by executive order, roll out, and this is something for our next podcast perhaps, but to roll out my plan to really mitigate and tackle the homelessness crisis. I spent 6 years on the front lines of battling homelessness as a real estate developer. I have a lot that I bring to the table in terms of a real practical, comprehensive solution for that. So that would be another day one initiative as well. In terms of what does success look like? One, I would go back to what's the biggest concern for the people of California? Hands down, it's the economy. Whatever the metric of success would be, it would have to involve making California more affordable for the average person. So by the end of year 3, my goal would be to remove state income tax for anyone who's earning $250,000 a year or less. By the end of year 1, we should be a third of the way to that milestone. That would be one specific metric that one could use to determine efficacy of my time in office.
Well said. And you're going to be busy, Brandon. There's a lot to tackle day one.
Yeah.
Kudos to you. On the topic of state income tax and such, what are your thoughts on universal basic income?
I view the way forward as not just giving people free stuff. I do understand that there's a time and place for people to get help. I'm certainly not denying that. But look, I think that by bolstering the economy, by making California a place that attracts more businesses and therefore more opportunity, more chances for people to advance their careers, earn a reasonable wage, I think that's the path forward. So in that sense, I would shy away from that.
While I have you, Brandon, breaking news today, there was unfortunately a shooting in Minnesota. And unfortunately, there were some individuals that were killed and critically injured. What's your thoughts on gun control here for the state of California? In full transparency, Brandon, I do own guns myself. I think I purchased my very first one on the date where California saw the most transactions around guns and ammunition. I think this was in 2020, right when COVID broke out.
It's certainly a sensitive issue. I am all for Second Amendment rights. I don't think those should be imposed or those should be removed or restricted in any way. I do believe in the right to bear arms. I grew up in Iowa, and I spent a lot of time in Missouri and other parts of the Midwest, and carrying around your firearm, whether it's concealed or open carry, depending on the state, it's just something that I grew up with and was very used to. The issue with these shootings, it comes down to a breakdown of the family unit. If we're really going to get down to the core issue, it is the breakdown of the family that is leading to tragedies like this. And so trying to curb the opportunity for people to responsibly engage in gun ownership. Look at places like Chicago, where they've really ratcheted down and crime is just absolutely out of control. What we need is a focus on the family. We need to help strengthen families. We want to make families healthier. And by extension, that will help mitigate a lot of the violent crime and tragedies that come from that as a result.
You brought up Governor Gavin Newsom, earlier on in our conversation here, Brandon. And it's just really disheartening when you see the relationship between California's governor and the president of the United States. Yeah. What are your thoughts on and your approach on building and maintaining a fruitful and successful relationship with the most powerful man in the United States?
Well, look, obviously I'm running as Republican. I voted for President Trump. I think that alone would make it easier for me to work with him than somebody like Gavin Newsom. But regardless of who you are in politics and even outside of politics, you're going to have to learn to work with people that you just flat out perhaps don't like. They don't like you. You don't agree on a lot of different things. But a lot of this comes down to leadership. I don't know Gavin Newsom apart from what anybody else knows from other men that met him personally, but one has to ask the question, what is his real motivation here? Clearly, it's not doing what's best for the people of California. California is a wreck in every area that you look at. It seems to me that he's most interested in a potential run for the next presidential race, and that's where his focus is. So again, it starts with a certain mindset. What is best for the people, having dialogue with those who you agree with or don't agree with, and do what you can to move forward, compromise where you can, But again, having the best interest of the people always as the focal point.
Brandon, thank you very much for sharing your time with me. This has been a very insightful conversation, and I'm thrilled that you are the man representing the Republican Party and you're here to restore California. There's a lot to be said, and there's a lot to really take on with those initiatives like you've mentioned. Do you mind leaving a call to action for those in the audience to learn more about you and participate in your movement?
Absolutely. And as you already mentioned, they can visit restoreca.org to get a better idea of my different policy positions. I've also authored a book available on Amazon called California's Comeback. They can check that out. But look, the real call to action, and we've heard it said over and over again, is when the time comes, get out and vote. Your voice matters. And we need everyone to participate, especially in this next upcoming election. Most people in California do not approve of the work that Gavin Newsom has done over what will be his last 8 years as governor. But look, if each individual Californian does not exercise their right to vote, then we'll probably have a pretty good chance of getting somebody along the same lines as Newsom. We certainly don't want that. So exercise your right to vote, get out and do that. That would be my call to action.
Yeah, well said, and way to end this on a high note. Appreciate you joining me today, Brandon. You look very dapper and making me feel a little bit self-conscious, but I guess I'm pulling the Steve Jobs card. It's just easy.
There you go.
Dress all black and wear the same jersey. But again, just want to say thanks for stopping by. We'll have to have you back on the channel again as soon as possible, especially as you ramp up your campaign. And I'm willing and eager to help echo your campaign and mission. Again, I align with many of the things that you said today, or everything you said today. So good luck with ramping up your campaign, sir, and reach out anytime you need support from me on a grassroots level. And to everyone tuning in today, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for stopping by. Make sure you follow Brandon Jones. Visit restorecalifornia.org, restoreca.org. Thanks for tuning in. Love you mucho. Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you.